Celeste Rivera adjusted her black server's uniform for the 10th time that evening, her hands trembling slightly as she balanced the silver tray of champagne flutes. The grand ballroom of the Meridian Hotel sparkled like a jewel box, with crystal, chandeliers casting rainbow lights across marble floors that probably cost more than her yearly rent. She didn't belong here among Manhattan's elite, but her best friend Nina had begged her to cover this shift at the last minute. Just smile and stay invisible, Nina had warned her earlier. These people don't see us as human beings anyway. Celeste needed the money desperately. Her mother's cancer treatments were bleeding her dry, and every dollar counted. At 24, she spent her days teaching art to children at a community center, and her nights working whatever job she could find. Tonight's gala would pay her rent for 2 weeks. The designer dress disaster. What made tonight different was the dress. Celeste had spent 3 weeks creating it from fabric remnants she'd found at a discount store. The midnight blue silk hugged her curves perfectly, its simple elegance hiding its humble origins. She'd hoped to blend in with the guests, maybe even feel beautiful for one night. She was wrong. Oh my goodness, look at this little waitress playing dress up. A sharp voice cut through the classical music. Victoria Sterling, Manhattan's most notorious socialite, approached with her usual entourage of perfectly polished women. Her platinum blonde hair was styled in an elaborate updo, and her red designer gown probably cost more than Celeste made. In 6 months, Celeste's stomach dropped, but she kept her professional smile in place. "Good evening, ladies. Champagne?" Victoria's green eyes sparkled with malicious delight as she circled Celeste like a predator. "Girls, come look at this adorable little thing. She's made herself a dress. How quaint. Did you use your grandmother's curtains, dear?" The group erupted in laughter, their voices carrying across the ballroom. Other guests began to turn and stare, their conversations dying as they focused on the spectacle. Celeste felt heat rising in her cheeks, but she stood her ground. "I made it myself," Celeste said quietly, proud despite her embarrassment. "How precious," Victoria cooed, then pretended to stumble, deliberately bumping into Celeste's tray. Red wine splashed across the midnight blue silk, spreading like blood across her chest. "Oops! I'm so clumsy. I hope that wasn't your only dress." The billionaire's entrance. The crowd's laughter grew louder, and Celeste felt tears threatening to spill. She clutched the empty tray to her chest, wine dripping onto the marble floor. Just as she was about to flee, the entire ballroom fell silent. Sebastian. Cross had arrived. Even Celeste, who avoided celebrity gossip, knew who he was. The 30-year-old tech billionaire dominated headlines with his revolutionary software company and mysterious personal life. He was impossibly tall, with dark wavy hair and steel-gray eyes that seemed to see everything. His black tuxedo was perfectly tailored, emphasizing his broad shoulders and athletic build. But it wasn't his appearance that commanded the room's attention. It was his presence. He moved through the crowd like a force of nature, people stepping aside instinctively. His eyes swept the scene, taking in Victoria's triumphant smirk, the wine-stained dress, and Celeste's mortified face. Without hesitation, Sebastian reached into his jacket and pulled out a pristine white handkerchief. He approached Celeste directly, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. "Use this," he said, his voice deep and commanding as he placed the handkerchief in her trembling hands. The silk was softer than anything she'd ever touched, probably worth more than her entire outfit. Then he did something that made the entire ballroom gasp. Sebastian Cross, one of the most powerful men in New York, slipped his arm around Celeste's waist and pulled her against his side. She could feel the warmth of his body through his tuxedo, smell his expensive cologne mixed with something uniquely masculine. "Everyone," Sebastian's voice rang out clear and authoritative, "I'd like you to meet my wife." The aftermath of the lie. The silence that followed was deafening. Champagne glasses froze halfway to lips. Victoria's face went white, then red, then white again. Celeste felt the world spinning around her, Sebastian's arm the only thing keeping her upright. Your wife? Victoria's voice cracked. Sebastian, what are you talking about? We were supposed to announce our engagement tonight. Sebastian's gray eyes fixed on Victoria with cold indifference. Were we? I must have forgotten. His arm tightened around Celeste's waist. I've been rather distracted by my beautiful bride. Celeste finally found her voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. What are you doing? Sebastian leaned down, his breath warm against her ear. Saving you, he murmured so only she could hear. Play along. The crowd erupted in whispers. Phones appeared, capturing the moment that would be splashed across social media within minutes. Celeste Rivera, unknown art teacher, was suddenly the most talked-about woman in New York. Helena Cross, Sebastian's mother, pushed through the crowd. She was an elegant woman in her 50s, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, and her blue eyes sharp as winter. Sebastian, darling, surely you're joking. This girl is a waitress. She's an artist, Sebastian corrected, his voice carrying a warning. And she's my wife. I expect you all to treat her with the respect she deserves. Victoria stepped forward, her composure cracking. This is ridiculous, Sebastian. You can't seriously expect anyone to believe you married this nobody without telling. Anyone. Watch your tongue, Victoria. Sebastian's voice dropped to a dangerous level. You're speaking about my wife. The escape plan. The tension in the room was suffocating. Celeste could feel hundreds of eyes on her, dissecting every detail of her appearance, her background, her worthiness. She wanted to run, to disappear, but Sebastian's presence kept her anchored. Ladies and gentlemen, Sebastian addressed the crowd. My wife and I have had a long day. We'll be retiring for the evening. He guided Celeste toward the exit, his hand never leaving her waist. The crowd parted before them like the Red Sea, whispers following in their wake. Once they were outside the ballroom, in a quiet corridor lined with expensive artwork, Celeste finally pulled away from Sebastian's embrace. Are you insane? She hissed, her voice shaking with adrenaline and confusion. You just told everyone I'm your wife. I don't even know you. Sebastian studied her face, his gray eyes unreadable. You were drowning in there. They would have torn you apart for sport. So, you lied to save me? Do you have any idea what you've just done? The media will go crazy. People will want to know everything about me. I know exactly what I've done, Sebastian said calmly. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Celeste stared at him, wine still staining her dress, her hair disheveled from the evening's chaos. I'm going to go home and pretend this never happened. That's not an option anymore, Sebastian said, pulling out his phone. Already the screen was lighting up with notifications. Look. Celeste's heart sank as she saw the headlines already forming. Sebastian Cross's secret. Wife revealed at charity gala. Billionaire's mystery bride. From waitress to wife. The Cinderella story. This is a nightmare, she whispered. Sebastian pocketed his phone and looked at her seriously. It doesn't have to be. I have a proposition for you. The impossible proposal. Proposition? Celeste laughed bitterly. You've already ruined my life. What more could you possibly want? I want you to be my wife. Temporarily, Sebastian said, his voice matter of fact. For real this time. Celeste's mouth fell open. You're completely insane. My mother and the board of directors have been pressuring me to marry Victoria Sterling. It would merge our companies and make both families incredibly wealthy. But I can't stand the woman, and after tonight, I suspect the feeling is mutual. So you want to use me to get out of an arranged marriage? I want to offer you a mutually beneficial arrangement, Sebastian corrected. You need money for your mother's medical bills. Don't look surprised. I had you investigated the moment I decided to help you. I need a wife who won't try to control my life or steal my fortune. Celeste's head was spinning. This is crazy. People don't just get married for business arrangements anymore. They do in my world, Sebastian said grimly. The difference is, I'm offering you a choice. Marry me for 1 year. Help me convince my family and the board that I'm settled and responsible. In return, I'll pay all your mother's medical expenses and give you enough money to open that art studio you've been dreaming about. How do you know about the studio? I told you I had you investigated. Elena Rivera, age 52, stage 3, breast cancer. You've been working 3 jobs to pay for her treatments. You've applied for grants to open a community art center 17 times and been rejected each time due to lack of funding. Celeste felt exposed, vulnerable. This stranger knew her deepest struggles and dreams. And if I say no, then you go. Home to your 1-bedroom apartment, continue working yourself to death, and watch your mother's condition worsen because you can't afford the best treatment. The words hit like physical blows. Celeste thought of her mother, growing thinner and weaker with each passing day. She thought of the children at the community center who had so little joy in their lives, how an art studio could give them hope and purpose. 1 year? She asked quietly. 12 months. We'll live together, appear at social functions, convince everyone our marriage is real. After that, we'll have a quiet divorce, and you'll never have to see me again. Celeste looked down at her wine-stained dress, then back at Sebastian's serious face. And you'll pay for everything? My mother's treatment, the studio? Everything. Consider it an investment in maintaining my independence. The corridor was quiet except for the distant sound of the gala continuing without. Them. Celeste knew her life had already changed irreversibly the moment Sebastian claimed her as his wife. She could either run from it or try to turn it to her advantage. What about love? She asked suddenly. What if one of us falls for the other? Sebastian's expression didn't change. I don't believe in love, Celeste. I believe in contracts, mutual benefit, and clear expectations. As long as we both remember this is business, we'll be fine. Celeste extended her hand, still clutching his expensive handkerchief. Okay, Sebastian Cross. You have yourself a deal. As they shook hands in that elegant corridor, neither of them noticed Victoria Sterling watching from the shadows, her face twisted with rage and determination. The game had just begun, and she had no intention of losing. Celeste woke up in a bedroom larger than her entire apartment, sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Central Park. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then the events of the previous night came flooding back. The gala, Victoria's humiliation, Sebastian's shocking declaration, and their handshake agreement in the corridor. She was now Mrs. Sebastian Cross, at least on paper and in the public eye. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Come in, she called, pulling the silk robe tighter around herself. It had been waiting for her last night, along with an entire wardrobe that somehow fit her perfectly. James Mitchell, Sebastian's assistant, entered carrying a silver tray with coffee and pastries. He was a man in his early 30s with kind, brown eyes and an efficient manner that somehow managed to be warm rather than cold. Good morning, Mrs. Cross, he said, setting the tray on the bedside table. Mr. Cross asked me to inform you that the legal documents are ready for your review, and he'd like to meet with you in his study at 10 o'clock. Legal documents? Celeste's stomach clenched. The marriage contract, ma'am. Mr. Cross wants everything. Properly documented to protect both parties. After James left, Celeste stood by the window, watching people move through the park like ants. Her phone had been vibrating all morning with calls from unknown numbers. The story had exploded overnight, just as Sebastian predicted. The contract negotiation Sebastian's study was a monument to power and success. Dark wood paneling, leather-bound books, and awards lined the walls. Behind an imposing mahogany desk sat the man who had turned her life upside down in a single evening. This morning, he looked different. Gone was the tuxedo, replaced by a charcoal, gray suit that emphasized his tall frame. His dark hair was slightly mussed, as if he'd been running his hands through it, and his gray eyes held a weariness that made him seem more human. "Sleep well?" he asked without looking up from the documents spread before him. "As well as anyone can when their entire life changes overnight," Celeste replied, taking the chair across from his desk. Sebastian finally met her eyes, and she caught a flicker of something that might have been regret. "I know this isn't easy. That's why I want everything clearly defined." He slid a thick folder across the desk. "The contract covers every aspect of our arrangement: living situations, public appearances, financial obligations, and the terms of our eventual divorce." Celeste opened the folder, her eyes widening at the legal language. "I can't understand half of this. The important points are highlighted. You'll maintain your own bedroom and privacy. We'll appear together at major social functions and family gatherings. All your mother's medical expenses will be covered immediately, and you'll receive a monthly allowance for personal expenses." "How much?" Celeste asked, then felt embarrassed for being so direct. $50,000 a month. Celeste nearly dropped the folder. "That's more than I make in a year." "You're now the wife of a billionaire. You need to look the part." Sebastian's tone was matter-of-fact, but his eyes softened slightly. "There's also a clause about the art studio. I've already identified 3 potential locations in the city." The family meeting. Before Celeste could fully process the contract terms, James appeared in the doorway. "Sir, your parents have arrived. They're waiting in the drawing room." Sebastian's jaw tightened. "Already? I thought we'd have more time." "Time for what?" Celeste asked, panic rising in her voice. "To prepare you for the interrogation," Sebastian said grimly. "My parents don't accept anything at face value, especially when it threatens their plans." The drawing room was elegant in the way that old money always was, understated but impossibly expensive. Helena Cross sat ramrod straight on a cream-colored sofa, her silver hair perfectly styled despite the early hour. Beside her sat a distinguished man with Sebastian's gray eyes and an air of quiet authority. "Mother, father," Sebastian said, his hand settling protectively on Celeste's lower back. "I'd like you to properly meet my wife, Celeste." Richard Cross stood and extended his hand with a politician's smile. "Celeste, welcome to the family. I apologize for the abrupt introduction last night." Helena remained seated, her blue eyes analyzing. Celeste like a scientist studying a specimen. "Yes, it was quite the surprise. Tell me, dear, how long have you and Sebastian been seeing each other?" Celeste felt Sebastian's warning touch against her back. They hadn't prepared for these questions. We kept things private," she managed. "How romantic." Helena's voice dripped with skepticism. "And your family? What do they do?" "My mother is a nurse," Celeste said, lifting her chin with pride. "She's currently battling cancer." "I'm sorry to hear that," Richard said, and his sympathy seemed genuine. "And your father?" "He died when I was 12. Car accident." An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Helena's expression softened fractionally, but her guard remained up. "Sebastian tells us you're an artist," Richard continued, clearly trying to find safer ground. "I teach art to children at a community center in Brooklyn," Celeste said. "I also paint, though I haven't had much time for my own work lately." "How noble," Helena said, her tone suggesting it was anything but. "And now you'll be giving that up, I assume? The Cross family has certain expectations." "Actually," Sebastian interjected, "Celeste will be continuing her work. In fact, we're planning to expand it. A proper studio space where she can teach and create." Helena's eyes sharpened. "How progressive of you, darling. Though I hope you understand, Celeste, that being a Cross comes with responsibilities. Charity boards, social obligations, maintaining the family reputation." The test of loyalty after. His parents left, Sebastian found Celeste on the terrace, staring out at the city skyline. She'd changed into jeans and a simple sweater, looking more like herself than she had since arriving. "That went better than expected," he said, joining her at the railing. "Your mother hates me. My mother hates everyone who threatens her control over my life. It's not personal." Celeste turned to face him. "Everything about this is personal, Sebastian. You're asking me to live a lie for a year, to pretend to love you in front of your family and friends." "I'm not asking you to love me," Sebastian said quietly. "I'm asking you to help me avoid marrying someone I despise while helping you save your mother's life. It's a business transaction." "Is it?" Celeste searched his face. "Because last night when you put your arm around me, when you called me your wife, it felt like more than business." Sebastian was quiet for a long moment, his gray eyes unreadable. What it felt like doesn't matter. What matters is that we both get what we need from this arrangement. But even as he said the words, Sebastian couldn't shake the memory of how perfectly Celeste had fit against his side, or the way her brown eyes had sparked with defiance when Victoria attacked her. The media. Storm by afternoon, the penthouse was under siege. Photographers camped outside the building, reporters called every number they could find, and social media exploded with speculation about Sebastian's mystery bride. Celeste sat in the living room, scrolling through headlines on her laptop while Sebastian handled business calls in his office. Billionaire's secret wedding, love or scandal. From rags to riches, the Cinderella story of Celeste Rivera. Victoria Sterling speaks out. I wish them well. The last headline made Celeste snort. She clicked on the article to find a photo of Victoria looking elegant and composed outside her family's estate. "Sebastian and I were never officially engaged," Victoria was quoted as saying. "We're simply good friends, and I'm happy he's found love. Though I must admit, I'm surprised by his choice." The subtle dig wasn't lost on anyone. Comments flooded in, dissecting everything from Celeste's background to her appearance at the gala. "She's clearly a gold digger. That dress was homemade. How embarrassing. At least she's pretty. I guess that's all billionaires care about." Celeste slammed the laptop shut, tears threatening. She'd known this would be difficult, but seeing her life torn apart by strangers was harder than she'd imagined. "Regrets already?" Sebastian's voice came from the doorway. "Don't you ever get tired of people judging everything you do?" Sebastian sat beside her on the sofa, close enough that she could smell his cologne. "You learn to stop caring what people think. The only opinions that matter are the ones from people who actually know you." "And how many people actually know you, Sebastian?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. "Fewer than you might think." The hospital visit that evening, Sebastian surprised Celeste by suggesting they visit her mother. "If we're going to convince people this marriage is real, I should meet my mother-in-law." Dr. Elena Rivera was in her hospital room looking small and fragile against the white sheets, but her eyes were bright and alert as Celeste entered with Sebastian behind her. "Mom, this is Sebastian," Celeste said, her voice tight with emotion. Elena studied Sebastian with the sharp gaze of a nurse accustomed to reading people quickly. "So you're the man who married my daughter without inviting her mother to the wedding?" Sebastian had the grace to look embarrassed. "I apologize, Mrs. Rivera. The circumstances were unusual." "I can imagine." Elena's tone was dry. "Celeste tells me you're helping with my medical bills." "It's what family does," Sebastian said simply. Elena's expression softened slightly. "Sit down, both of you. Sebastian, tell me about yourself, and don't give me the rehearsed version you use for reporters." For the next hour, Sebastian found himself talking more honestly than he had in years. About losing his mother when he was young, about the pressure to live up to his father's expectations, about building his company from nothing but an idea and determination. Elena listened without judgment, occasionally asking pointed questions that cut straight to the heart of things. When visiting hours ended, she hugged Celeste tightly. "He's not what I expected," she whispered in her daughter's ear. "But he looks at you like you matter. That's something." The unexpected revelation on the drive back to the penthouse, Sebastian, was unusually quiet. Finally, Celeste couldn't stand it anymore. "What are you thinking about?" "Your mother," Sebastian said. "She reminds me of mine." It was the first time he'd mentioned his mother without being asked. "What was she like?" "Strong, stubborn. She could see through anyone's lies in about 5 minutes." Sebastian's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "She died when I was 15. Cancer, like your mother." Celeste felt something shift between them, a crack in the wall Sebastian kept around himself. "I'm sorry." "She would have liked you," Sebastian said quietly. "She always said the measure of a person wasn't what they had, but what they did with what they were given." When they arrived home, Celeste found herself lingering in the elevator with Sebastian instead of rushing to her room. The space felt smaller somehow, charged with an energy that hadn't been there before. "Sebastian," she said as the doors opened to their floor, "this contract of yours, what happens if things get complicated?" "Complicated how?" Celeste met his eyes, seeing her own confusion reflected there. "What if the lines start to blur? What if it stops feeling like pretending?" Sebastian was quiet for a long moment, his gray eyes searching her face. "Then we remind ourselves why we're here. You need money for your mother. I need to avoid Victoria Sterling. Everything else is just collateral damage." But as they said goodnight and went to their separate rooms, both of them knew it was already too late for such simple definitions. The game they'd started was changing, and neither of them was entirely sure of the rules anymore. 3 weeks into their marriage, Celeste and Sebastian had fallen into a routine that felt almost natural. She spent her mornings at the community center, teaching art to children whose faces lit up when she walked into the room. Sebastian buried himself in work, but he'd started joining her for dinner each night, their conversations ranging from art to business to their very different childhoods. The media attention hadn't died down, but they'd learned to navigate it together. Sebastian's hand on her waist at charity events no longer felt foreign, and Celeste had stopped flinching when photographers' flashes went off around them. But beneath the surface, something was shifting. The way Sebastian's eyes lingered on her, when he thought she wasn't looking. The way her pulse quickened when he brushed past her in the kitchen. The careful distance they maintained was becoming harder to sustain. Everything changed on a Tuesday morning when Celeste received a call that made her blood run cold. The blackmail attempt Victoria Sterling sat across from Celeste in an upscale cafe in Midtown, her perfectly manicured fingers wrapped around a coffee cup. She looked like she'd stepped off a magazine cover, her blonde hair sleek and her designer suit emphasizing her model-thin figure. "Thank you for meeting me," Victoria said, her voice sweet as poison. "I thought it was time we had a little chat." Woman to woman. Celeste had almost refused the invitation, but curiosity had won out. "What do you want, Victoria?" Straight to the point. "I like that." Victoria smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I want to make you an offer." She slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a check with more zeros than Celeste had ever seen in one place. $5 million, Victoria said casually. "All you have to do is walk away from Sebastian. Quietly, cleanly, with a story about realizing you weren't compatible." Celeste stared at the check, her mind reeling. "You want to pay me to divorce my husband?" "I want to pay you to stop playing house with the man who belongs with me." Victoria's mask slipped, revealing the venom beneath. "Sebastian and I have been destined for each other since we were children. Our families, our businesses, our entire world makes sense together. You're just a temporary obstacle. If Sebastian wanted to be with you, he would be." Victoria laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Oh, sweet, naive Celeste, do you really think this marriage is about love? Sebastian married you to avoid marrying me, yes, but not because he doesn't want me. He's just being stubborn." She leaned forward, her green eyes glittering with malice. "But I know things about your precious husband that you don't. Things that would change how you see him." "What kind of things?" "The kind that could destroy him if they came to light." Victoria sat back, satisfied with Celeste's reaction. "Take the money, dear. Walk away while you still can with your dignity intact." The investigation Celeste left the cafe with the check burning a hole in her purse and Victoria's words echoing in her mind. She couldn't bring herself to go home immediately, instead wandering through Central Park as autumn leaves fell around her like confetti. What could Victoria possibly know about Sebastian that was so damaging? And why was she so confident it would change everything? That evening, Sebastian noticed her distraction immediately. "You're quiet tonight," he said over dinner. "Everything all right?" Celeste almost told him about Victoria's offer, but something held her back. "Just tired. Long day at the center." Sebastian studied her face with those penetrating gray eyes. "Celeste, if something's wrong—" "Nothing's wrong," she said quickly, then felt guilty for lying. But that night, curiosity got the better of her. While Sebastian worked late in his study, Celeste found herself in his home office, looking through files and documents she probably had no business seeing. She wasn't sure what she was looking for until she found it. A folder marked Meridian Project, hidden in the back of a locked drawer that had been left open. Inside were documents that made her blood run cold, the devastating discovery. The Meridian Project was a low-income housing development in Brooklyn, the same neighborhood where Celeste had grown up. According to the documents, Sebastian's company had been systematically buying up properties, evicting long-term residents, and planning to demolish the entire area to build luxury condos. Among the files was a list of displaced families, and Celeste's heart stopped when she saw familiar names. Mrs. Rodriguez, who had lived next door to her childhood home. The Johnsons, whose son had been in her art classes. Dozens of families she'd known for years, all forced out to make way for Sebastian's profit. The worst part was the timeline. The project had been in development for over a year, long before they'd met, which meant Sebastian had known exactly who she was that night at the gala. He'd known she came from the neighborhood he was destroying. Celeste sank into Sebastian's desk chair, the papers scattered before her. Everything made horrible sense now. The immediate investigation into her, background, the perfect wardrobe that fit her exactly, the way he'd swooped in to save her that night. Then why? Because Victoria Sterling was about to destroy you for sport, and I couldn't stand to watch it happen. His gray eyes were fierce with emotion. Because in that moment, you were the most real thing I'd seen in years. Real? Celeste laughed bitterly. "Nothing about this has been real. Our marriage, our conversations, the way you look at me, it's all been part of your grand plan." "That's not true, isn't it?" Celeste moved closer, her brown eyes blazing. "Tell me, Sebastian, when you decided to claim me as your wife that night, was it really to save me from Victoria? Or was it because you realized you could kill two birds with one stone? Avoid an unwanted marriage and neutralize any opposition to your precious project?" Sebastian was quiet for too long, and his silence was answer enough. "The final truth, I started the Meridian Project before I knew you existed," Sebastian said finally, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "It's true. And yes, when I saw you that night, I knew you were from that neighborhood, but helping you wasn't part of some master plan." "Then why did you do it?" Sebastian looked at her for a long moment, something vulnerable flickering in his eyes. "Because you reminded me of my mother. She grew up in poverty, worked her way up to marry my father, and spent her life fighting for people who couldn't fight. for themselves. When I saw Victoria attacking you, I saw her attacking everything my mother stood for. So this was about your mother, not me. It started that way, Sebastian admitted, but somewhere along the line, it became about you. About the way you light up when you talk about your students. About how you made my house feel like a home for the first time since my mother died. About how you see the good in everyone, even me. Celeste felt tears threatening, but she refused to let them fall. It doesn't matter. You still lied to me. You're still destroying people's lives for profit. The project's been canceled, Sebastian said quietly. What? I canceled it 2 weeks ago. Told the board we were withdrawing from residential development to focus on commercial properties. He gestured to the papers on his desk. I was trying to figure out how to tell you. Celeste stared at him, not sure whether to believe it. Why would you do that? Because you were right. That first night, we had dinner. You said a strong business wasn't just about profits. It was about how it treated people. You made me see that I was becoming everything I used to despise. The choice. The room fell silent, except for the tick of an antique clock on the mantel. Celeste looked at the man she'd married, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. He wasn't the cold, calculating billionaire she'd thought he was, but he wasn't the knight in shining armor either. He was just a man, flawed and complicated, trying to navigate a world that had taught him to value money over people. Where does this leave us? She asked finally. Sebastian met her eyes, and she saw something there she'd never seen before. Fear. I don't know. Our contract still has 9 months left, but if you want to leave, I'll understand. I'll make sure your mother's treatments continue, and I'll set up the art studio like I promised. You don't owe me anything. What do you want, Sebastian? I want you to stay, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Not because of the contract or the media or my family's expectations. I want you to stay because somewhere in these past 3 weeks, I fell in love with my fake wife. The words hung in the air between them like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. Love? Celeste whispered. I know I don't have the right to ask. I know I've manipulated and lied and made choices. That hurt people. But I also know that you've changed me in ways I didn't think were possible. You've made me want to be better. Celeste thought about the past 3 weeks, the quiet dinners, the easy conversations, the way Sebastian had held her hand during her mother's chemo treatments, the way he'd looked at her art with genuine appreciation, not condescending approval, the way he'd made her feel seen and valued in a world that had always treated her as invisible. I don't know if I can trust you again, she said honestly. Then let me earn it back, Sebastian said, stepping closer. However long it takes, whatever I have to do. Let me prove that what we have is real. Celeste looked into his gray eyes and saw her own future reflected there. Not the safe, predictable life she'd planned, but something messy and complicated and absolutely terrifying. One condition, she said finally. Anything. No more secrets. No more lies. If we're going to try to make this real, it has to be built on truth. Sebastian nodded, hope flickering in his eyes. Does this mean you're staying? Celeste thought of Victoria's check, still sitting in her purse upstairs. $5 million to walk away clean. But as she looked at Sebastian, really looked at him, she realized she didn't want clean. She wanted complicated and messy and real. I'm staying, she said, but we're starting over. No contract, no arrangement. If this is going to work, it has to be because we choose each other every day. Sebastian's smile was like sunrise after a long night. I can live with that. As he pulled her into his arms, Celeste thought about how much had changed since that night at the gala. She'd been laughed at, humiliated, and claimed by a stranger. But somewhere in the chaos, she'd found something she hadn't been looking for. Love that was real, complicated, and worth fighting for. The richest man in the room had called her his wife as a lie, but now she was choosing to make it the truth. And for the first time since this all began, Celeste Rivera Cross felt like she was exactly where she belonged.